What's up, Renegades? Welcome to another Heroscape Game Designer Roundtable. My name is Anais. I'm the community coordinator here at Renegade, and I'm joined by some of the lovely people who work on everybody's favorite miniatures game, Heroscape. If you want to introduce yourself, that'd be great, and tell us a little bit about what you do. Dylan, why don't you start?
Great. Hi, I'm Dylan. I'm one of the three designers for Heroscape with Renegade alongside Rowan and Alex. It's a dream come true for me as someone who's been playing this game since it first launched and now a little over a year into designing new stuff with these lovely folks and couldn't be happier. So excited.
Sweet. Rowan?
Hi, Anais just said my name. It's Rowan. If you've been on these streams before, you've probably seen me before. As Dylan also mentioned, I'm one of the three designers currently working on Heroscape. And I'm excited to get started talking about the good stuff. Let's not talk about me too much. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
And Alex.
Hey, Alex here. Relative Heroscape neophyte compared to Dylan and Rowan, but I've been doing war game design for a long time, and I've been doing Heroscape for a little over a year at this point.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to have you guys here. Thanks for meeting with me to talk a little bit more about Heroscape. Just for the audience's sake, today we announced a bunch of new releases, a new things open for pre-order now. So make sure to go check out the Renegade Con June announcement stream so that you can be up to date on all the cool stuff that we're going to talk about. So without further ado, let's get into it. And so I'm going to start with a question for Rowan, but for, anybody, if anybody has a good answer, feel free to jump in. In approaching unit archetypes for a release wave, what's the design process for choosing what to make for each set? With practically unlimited options for figures, like where do you even start?
Yeah, so that's, oh boy, then where do you even start?
Where do you
We
even
get right
start?
to it. Where do you start? So as far as narrowing down infinite possibilities, that's definitely where you start. Is the process of narrowing. So fortunately, we don't have truly infinite because we do have some ground that we're building off of, right? We have everything from Age of Annihilation that has come out. And so we want to start with that base and build out into the rest of the game space, or what is about to be the rest of the game space as we put new figures out into it. So when designing a brand new figure, we tend to have been given some constraints from production to begin with. So production will have asked us to make something that is going to be some common figures to fill out some army expansions, or they might say, this year we would really like to see a battle box because we've talked to, the fans and talked to other people, and we want to get some more of those sort of entry products. Wherever it is, we sort of start with the definition of what type of thing we're going to be making and generally how many of them we get. So, sometimes I ask Lee, I want to put, four real big figures in this box. And Lee is like, no, because no one wants to pay for all of those at the same time. So, then we narrow the possibility space down that way. And we have a general sort of knowledge of how many figures, what type of figures, are they heroes, are they squads, etc. And then once we have that information, we look at what is already out and start looking at how to build into that space. So with our first sets of commons, we really wanted to make sure that all of the generals are going to get some. So with the very first commons, you just sort of pick some generals and start giving them commons. And as you move along, you just keep going down the list. Like, who doesn't have any? Let's get them some so that everybody has their fillers for their armies. Once you have built those commons, and those commons sort of define a mechanical space, and so you can build new figures that complement those. And you also want to pull from a good mixture of aesthetics when building a new figure. So we always try to sort of mix leaning into things that are familiar with treading new ground so that you're not just getting the same things all the time. So you might have noticed we've revisited Ikaria, but haven't brought exactly the same things you've seen from Ikaria before back to the battlefield. They're thematically tied, but we're still treading new ground. So that's sort of a broad field answer for where on Earth we start when we're filling these things out.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that makes sense to me. The process, it sounds to me like the process is even more in depth than the average gamer might realize, because it wouldn't make sense to just like make a bunch of big figures, like you said, even though they would look super cool on a shelf. Speaking of big figures, I have a question for Dylan. How did you decide which dragons would get to be in the Scions of Ikaria? And follow up to that, who is your favorite Heroscape dragon?
That was a very fun art direction moment to know that we were doing this squad that was going to be the insufferable youth of Ikarian dragon royalty. Getting that prompt and then taking that in an art direction path was choice. So picking which dragons get a mini me. They had to have breath weapons, so unfortunately, my boy Karos was out, so sad times, but alas. Beyond that, we wanted one that was representing Utgar because it's an Utgar squad. And Mimring is the obvious choice there. He's iconic. He's the OG Heroscape dragon. Beyond that, everyone loves Nilfheim, so Nilfheim got in. And Braxis is the answer to the other question of who is my favorite Heroscape dragon. Poisonous Acid Breath is delightfully over redundant and had to make an appearance. So Braxis got to be the other one. And then from there, it's just making sure that all the little details of those dragons that we all know and love made it into these offspring versions for the Scions.
How about Alex Rowan? What are your favorite Heroscape dragons? You got one, or are they all too good to pick?
I gotta give it up for oh, who's the really squiggly one?
Also a Braxis fan?
Yeah, I think I'm a Braxis fan. Yeah, I was gonna say I like Nilfheim too, but just the shape of Braxis is really great.
Nilfheim's shape is much more come at me, bro.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm Team Braxis.
I am
Also,
a
it's
big
my favorite color, so can't go wrong with that. If you can count black as a color, which I do.
Oh man, I am a big fan of the squiggliness of the dragons. I would have to say, if we're picking favorite by dragon, I have fought the most battles against and alongside. It would definitely be Karos, my bane. Dylan's already laughing. Karos is both my bane and my beloved. I love Karos. It's classic to me. But of course, like Dylan said, you couldn't put Karos in because of no breath weapon. But we might see a little bit of a nod to Karos in the future someday. Can't leave
Eyebrow
Karos out.
raised, sips tea. Wink, wink. So previously we had kind of like talked a little bit about commons. So this next question I have is for Alex. With common squads now arriving, what's the planned balance between unique and common releases?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a really tricky one because the way that common army cards function within the HeroScape rule set, they have a ton of advantages. You can put all of your order markers onto them and have a lot of flexibility. You get tremendous flexibility about which figures you move versus which you don't. So they have a lot of really dynamic built-in strengths. So you really have to be very careful that the commons that you create don't push all of the unique heroes and squads out of the meta. So it's a delicate balancing act because you want them to be impactful and fun, but you also don't want to have a game where it's nothing but say Molten Crustaceans or Gallery Vanguard or X, Y, or Z. So it's a balancing act, and not in this batch of figures in particular, because these are a lot of standalone commons that can kind of slot into any army, with the exception of the Scions, which are kind of designed to work with Zenithrax and other dragons, among other figures. But in the future, there are a lot of commons that are specifically designed to bond with existing unique heroes in a very Heroscape way that players will be familiar with. The Vorids of Volarak will get some support in that regard. So it's commons sort of have to fit into the game without overwhelming all the cool, unique stuff. I mean, the name of the game is Heroscape, so we want to make sure that the heroes are viable and stars in their own right.
And stars they are. Got a lot of cool stuff coming down the pipeline that all of us here, and I'm sure everybody watching is very excited about. I'd love to know from each of you, who is your favorite design from this particular story arc? Starting with I guess, Alex, you took a deep breath
Sure.
in, so I'm sure you're ready.
Yeah, yeah, you saw me prepare mentally, physically, all of the above. I really like the Galrai. The Galrai were really fun to design, and it was one of the designs that we struggled with mechanically for quite a while. And there was a real team effort that surrounded the creation of their kind of signature ability, which is Tidal Advance. It took us a lot of iteration and a lot of different tries to get there, but the end result is a really interesting power that you have to think about when you're running the vanguards next to the Kraken Lings, or alongside a Washia or any of the other ways that you can run that build, because you really have to think about how many different order markers you want on the vanguards to move everybody forward versus how many order markers you want to put on, say, a Kraken Ling to get the most out of that fearsome creature's attack potential. They also, the sculpts I think are my favorite in the entire wave, and that's in a wave with little baby dragons, so that's impressive.
Yeah, hard to beat baby dragons.
Speaking of baby dragons and people who might want to one day beat them, I am I'm pretty fond of the Great Bow Archers as a design. Speaking to the place of commons in the game, as Alex said, you want to be especially careful with something like a ranged common, which just leans on the advantages that the commons already have by just giving them range. So we created a set of figures that has like a nice presence on the battlefield. Speaking of big figs, also they're giants, but then they have some impressive abilities to go with that. But they also have a distinct counterplay option that favors melee armies going into them. They are long shot specialists, so they want to keep you at range. And if you close on them, they actually have fewer and fewer ways to deal with you, as their ability to get that long draw shot off into your face diminishes. So they're a single power, sleek, common figure that we also worked on for a little while to get their numbers just where we wanted them. And I'm very happy with how those turned out. I hope everyone enjoys to play them.
I'm right alongside Alex. The Gelrai are just so fun. People who know me from other war games I've been a part of know I love a swarm army, and the ability to balance that idea of we get to move the entire army up at once to then make later activations a lot easier because everything has that aggressive aggro board presence is just I love it. And they're, just cool little fish guys, which is also very fun. Another one that was really cool to art direct, both them and the Krakenling, of trying to do aquatic sapient creatures in a new an original way, not leaning like merfolk, leaning more like a technofied deep one kind of vibe, and then with the Krakenling going not squid but ammonite for the inspiration was a fun sort of challenge to pull the strings at.
So I do have to ask, since we brought up the Kraken Ling a couple times now, does the Kraken Ling imply the existence of like a larger adult Kraken?
Who knows what
I
Perhaps?
suppose
mysteries
it
lurk in the
might.
deep?
Yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, you can't tell me too much about that. But so both of you, Dylan and Alex, you both brought up the Galrai and how that was one of your favorite things to design. Rowan, I have a question for you, but feel free, anybody can jump into this. What inspired the Galrai? What part do they play in Valhalla as a whole?
Yeah, so going back to what I said earlier about where do you start when trying to conceptualize something new, we definitely wanted, when I was first pitching them, it was the spot to put, like Dylan mentioned, sort of the swarm figure, like that as we're getting commons out there, there aren't any in modern. So we definitely wanted to do that. And then as far as their aesthetic, wanted to bring a new aspect to Valhalla, that we see a lot of the lands and the continent of Valhalla, but Valhalla has vast oceans as well, and they're completely unexplored so far. And so we wanted to look at them and see what kind of stuff could be in there. And the aquatic cousins to the Kiri is an interesting space to bring in more sentient creatures, more natives of Valhalla who have their own perspective on the world, the war, and the constant summoning of everything, just dumping it as water creatures. They also have an interesting perspective on the concept of the well springs, which is where all the power comes from. So there's some interesting stuff going down in the deep vents, and the Gelrai are a really good lens through which to explore that.
Yeah, and I'll just
Awesome.
jump in and add a little bit because the first question you asked, there's a component of our work that I want to just emphasize, which is that we work with a lore council, people who are steeped in Heroscape lore, writers, creators, yeah, and they have been helping to guide some of our story decisions, which then naturally sort of influences some of the figures that we decide to make. And so they're a part of it, and also the folks who worked on Age of Annihilation and obviously classic Heroscape are also a big part of it. Those storylines and established characters and stuff, play into future product planning as well. And Age of Annihilation kicked off with a sort of a big sneak attack by these pirates. And so pirates, water, exploring the seas, what might be lurking out
Sure.
there.
I can
That's
follow.
all a big
Yeah.
part. Yeah, so the Galrai fit into that in some small way. The Kraken Ling as well. Other figures in the future will be even more, a prominent version of that storyline. But what's been really cool to see is that there's dozens of different threads and through lines that are running through this story. And people will find out more and more about this as time goes on, and more bios come up, and more of the monthly scenarios come out. But there's a specific narrative arc for the era, and that influences what figures will be emphasized in the era as well. So that's part of what we're seeing with some of these releases as well. Not every one of them. Sometimes we just have a cool idea, and that becomes a figure. But a lot of it gets guided by that narrative, and the lore team's been doing an awesome job on that front.
Awesome. Yeah, shout out to the lore team and all of the wonderful people that work on this game. It's definitely a group effort. So
Mm-hmm.
it's great to be able to collaborate with so many talented people. Yeah, I guess a follow-up to that, because we've talked about different squad sizes. So this set of releases has a different, like a range of squad sizes. What are some of the benefits and challenges of designing for both smaller and larger squads? And I could toss this to Alex again, but obviously anybody can answer.
I think Dylan would be a good person to answer this because Dylan's a big time horde player and knows the value of a good four-figure
Yeah,
squad.
tell us about the small squad versus big squad.
Yeah, I mean, with Heroscape, it comes down to you've got three order markers in a round, and so you're limited in how many times you can activate your army. And so the more activations you're getting per order marker, the stronger that's going to be on average. So if you have a squad that's four figures, that is going to probably need to be a little weaker per figure or higher costed to balance out versus a three-figure squad, and then a two-figure squad where you only have those two activations each order marker needs to kind of punch above its weight to really make those order markers worth it, which you've seen on the two-figure squads we've done so far. Like if you look at the archers, they hit hard and from a long range. So when you're activating that, you're probably going to get some good solid punch out of that order marker. Same with the Tanuki trickers. They don't hit as hard, but they can do a lot with that activation to really make those two figures sing. Whereas something like the Gelrai, you have baked in efficiency with being able to move a bunch of stuff and get four activations with four movements and four attacks. So you'll notice their defense, at least on even ground, not that solid. You need to be able to chew through them a little more. So it's all about finding those individual balances. And then for something like the Scions, they're a three-figure squad, which would normally be average in terms of number of activations, but they bond with the heavy hitters. They bond with dragons and archmages and things that are really going to pull a lot of weight in an army. So their stats are much less because just getting any extra activations on top of a dragon is a huge swing in terms of the power level for that activation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Heroscape math is really complicated
Yeah.
because it's not just what's on any individual army card. It's what those figures bond with. It's how many you get to activate. It's are they a unique squad which degrades every time they lose a member, or are they a common squad that stays in play for until they're whittled down to their very final few. So yeah, it's been interesting because a lot of that is hidden knowledge too. It's stuff that you have to go back and check for like, oh gosh, does, if we make this a champion, what can it bond with? What is that? What are the implications for that? When I first started on this job and I looked at a synergy web, it looked like that, that meme with, from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with Charlie
Yeah.
and Pepe Sylvia, where it's just like, and it really does work like that, because it's one of the few war games that just allows anything to go into anything. So you have to really think through how things are going to play out when you're designing them, which can be a challenge, but a fun one.
Yeah, my uncle always said that you only need to be good enough at math to play games. So maybe the next step is you only need to be good enough at math to design games.
It is probably one step higher,
A little
unfortunately.
bit.
I mean, I quit math after algebra 2, and I do okay.
There you go. I took algebra 2 like 3 times, so I'm set.
Yeah, I hated it. I took the minimum amount of required math, and then I cheated in college, and I took like logic or something because I really didn't want to take another math class.
I would say statistics is probably the one that is
I'm
most
gonna say
frequently brought up. Yeah,
I'm very happy
if you're
I
looking for
pivoted to
what
AP
math
Stats
should I
being
do for
here.
games, stats,
Do you hear that, teenagers in high school math classes? Get good enough to go take AP
do your
stats.
stats.
Do your
Yep.
stats.
Yep.
And you could be talented designers like these fine folks here.
It certainly helps.
I'm sure it does. Well, I guess speaking of like hidden details and whatnot, this is a question for all of you. Are there any hidden details or fun facts you want to share about a figure in this wave? Anything cool?
My favorite hidden little thing, going back to art directing the Scions, the little Braxis, the reference image I gave to the sculptor for that is the woman yells at cat meme of the
That's
Amazing.
right. I forgot
so
about that.
that meme is sort of
God.
interpreted into the little Braxis in that
I
set.
remember that.
That's the best thing I've ever heard.
Well, speaking of a little version of a big thing, I guess another interesting detail is if you've been to Gen Con, you would have seen a life-sized Raylan. And mini Raylan looks a whole lot like life-sized Raylan. So keep your eyes on the giant statues. There could be hidden knowledge. Or,
That's true.
a good sculpt we can use for a mini in the future. Never waste a sculpt. Never.
We are getting close to wrapping up, so thank you all for joining me. I have one last question. It's kind of a big one, a chunky one. So feel free to answer as best you can. But what are your goals for shaping the contemporary meta based on what you've been seeing so far? And do you have any long-term goals for the gameplay that you want to see in contemporary? And we could start with.
I'll go.
Let's go,
I feel
Rowan.
like-
I was gonna say Alex, but he keeps going first, so I'm
Yeah,
I keep picking on
jump
him.
it in there.
Rowan, you first.
Sure. I feel like you challenged us. You were like, answer this question if you can.
No, I didn't. Well, I just on my screen it's 3 lines long, so I was like, oh boy.
Big question.
It's a big question. I think it's
It is a big
it's
question.
fair.
It's like you're sort of asking about, what are we viewing as sort of the heart and soul of the line as we go forward. And definitely a thing that has been mentioned that I'll put some more weight behind is that we want to keep the hero in Heroscape for sure. That it's really important to us as we shape the modern and contemporary meta that we're going to keep releasing unique heroes. There's going to be more than just the ones you've already seen, and we want those unique heroes to have a viable space to exist in. So, like, not every figure is going to be designed for top of competitive meta in mind, because also that's just how you wildly power scale off the charts. But we definitely want them to all have a place where they have a shot, that they're not just doomed to the not as good as commons bin immediately out the gates. Because those are the characters, they're the face cards of the game. Like they're fun, they're interesting. Like you can put a lot more complex mechanics onto one of those figures than you can onto a common that you're going to have a bazillion of in your army, and so that mechanic is going to sort of duplicate in complexity if it's a little too weird. So that's definitely a pillar of design that we are carrying forward, is how do we make sure that we're seeing armies that are carrying not just one and a bunch of commons, but more than a few unique heroes, and they're good even those armies. So that's what we want.
Yeah, jumping in on top of that, I think that's definitely the core of it. We want a good balance of unique and common because you've seen the all unique through all of the Avalon Hill designs, all of the Age of Annihilation up until this summer when we started rolling out some new commons. And so you're going to see more commons through next year that are going to complement what is currently out there. So there's going to be stuff that will bolster some of the unique content that seems a little underwhelming right now, stuff that's going to really shake that up and allow for some new army compositions. The idea is hopefully that there will be a ton of viable competitive armies going forward that'll let you play a lot of different archetypes. You can play a swarm, you can play all heroes, you can play synergistic melee bonding pods, you can play with some of your favorite Kyrie in fun new ways next year. Like we're being able to expand that meta. I think it's going to be exciting next year what we'll see on the tables at the major tournaments with how much variety there's going to be.
Yeah, and I'll tack onto this as well because our role has been a really interesting one as designers because we're sort of picking up, the baton, carrying the torch. There was a lot of groundwork laid for us, both with classic Heroscape and also with the Avalon Hill designs. And we are in no way, shape, or form, finished with supporting that stuff. Both some of the classic stuff, Scions are an interesting unit that is, going to be very interesting in the all-time format. They bond with dragons, kings, archmages. There's a lot of really fun and interesting builds that you can do. And it's a good unit to talk about too, because, a figure like Zenithrax, that power level was, designed with greenscales in mind, which are a classic squad that not everyone has access to, that they don't exist in contemporary. So the Scions are just a really good example of giving them a similar bonding squad, but it's different enough to kind of stand on its own weight. And we're going to be continuing to do stuff like that with certain figures in Age of Annihilation that have a good role in the all-time format because they draw from existing classic figures. We want to give them a contemporary equivalent to that, not the identical thing, but something that is going to fill that role in army construction. So, Zenithrax is going to get a huge boost from the Scions and become a much more, significant force on the battlefield. And so we've got our eyes on things like that. I mean, I mentioned Borids earlier. That's part of it. Certain Kyrie, without spoiling too much, you'll have to check with us again next time. But a lot of that decision making is steered by our War Council members, who are folks who worked on that Avalon Hill stuff and had certain ideas in mind for those designs. So we're trying to make sure that there's a real continuity there and that we finish the work that they started essentially with their help in order to make sure that all those designs get their due and get what was planned for them.
Awesome. Well, that about wraps up this game designer roundtable. Thank you, Dylan, Rowan, and Alex for joining me and answering some questions. Thank you all for watching. We've just scratched the surface of this, and if you enjoyed this video and you want more, give us a like, drop a comment, and let us know that you want to see more content from our game designers. But yeah, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media, check the links in the description so that you can pre-order some new Heroscape announced titles, and go to heroscape.com where we have our character bios, we got info on story arcs, you could see all of our art and some other cool content, so make sure to check that out, and we'll see you all next time. Bye!